Hello, welcome to Friday I'm in Bed.
Podcast for midlife women living their best life, but in bed by 10. This week on a Friday I'm in Bed, we're starting with the Artemis mission and the first woman travelling around the moon. We're talking about why this is such a big moment, why it's taken this long, and the wider shift too, with a more diverse crew, including the first black astronaut on a lunar mission. It feels like progress, but also a reminder of how overdue this all is.
Then we're getting into Wireless Festival, Kanye West being banned from the UK, and the ongoing question, can you separate the art from the artist? And more importantly, who gets forgiven and who doesn't? Because controversial men tend to carry on just fine, while women can get torn apart for something as simple as setting a few boundaries. So grab a cuppa and let's get into it.
Hi Gemma, how are you?
We didn't decide that, did we?
No, I started and so did you.
So who's going to go? Did you have a nice Easter weekend?
Yeah, it's funny because I can't seem to remember what we did. I was poorly. Unfortunately, I think my husband caught a bit of a viral bug thing from the aeroplane. That's normally what I do on an airplane, but he got it and then I got it. But that isn't all that happened at the weekend. But I did some sewing. I made a jacket out of a blanket. And that's what I did. How about you?
I made a trifle.
Oh, I saw that on stories.
Yeah, it was massive. We only finished eating it yesterday.
Love a trifle.
It was like chocolate and raspberry, and I put like chambord in the bottom with like chocolate brownies in the bottom, and then jelly and chocolate custard, and then mascarpone and whipped cream, and then I topped it with everything I could find in my cupboards. There were mini eggs, there were raspberries, and then I was like, oh, I've got gold spray and chocolate syrup, so I put edible gold spray, not just like random gold, like actually edible gold glitter. So yeah, it was an insane trifle, but it was very nice, and it's lasted us 5 days or whatever it is.
We have chocolate trifle for Christmas dinner pudding every year, and like it has to happen. I don't make it, my stepmom makes it, but it's like non-negotiable. But the funny thing is I'm pretty much the only one that eats it, so my children just eat whatever, and I just keep eating this trifle for a week, and it's like the best thing ever. We should make more trifle
just so you could eat the whole thing.
Yeah,
we have things like that, especially at Christmas. I don't know why we talk about Christmas now, it's Easter, but yeah, Christmas is that's when you like have to have a Christmas pudding, and you go, and then you have your Christmas dinner, and you go, I don't want Christmas pudding. So they tend to have quite a long expiry though, so sometimes you can have the same Christmas pudding 3 years in a row if you get them at the right time.
You're not selling them to me. So we've got
not once it's cooked, like, what if it's still in its packet?
It's still horrible. Well, we've got a couple of things to talk about this week, haven't we? They're very topical. And it's everything that's kind of being talked about this week in the news, apart from the bad stuff that we're not going to talk about.
The end of civilization as we know it. Yeah,
we're not
be doing with that.
No, we're not going to talk about that. But we're going to talk about the two other things that are on the news right now. So I think we should get into it, don't you?
Absolutely. So the first thing I want to talk about today is super topical because I want to talk about going to the moon. And I'm aware that sentence has not been said seriously by real humans for over 50 years, longer than I've been alive. But here we are. There's 4 astronauts literally on their way home right now. I think they're supposed to splash down like I think for us it will be like very early Saturday morning in UK time. And they've flown all the way around the moon. And one of the things that I'm definitely going to talk about is one of them is the same age as me. I don't know how that makes me feel when I'm like, what have you achieved in life, Jem? While someone else your age is flying around why do I keep saying room? Flying around the moon. So they'll have been up there for like 10 days. They left on the 1st of April. So I'm waiting for another 20 years for that to be the conspiracy theory that it never happened. So they've done a lunar flyby, and the last crewed deep space mission was in 1972. So what year were you born?
1972.
Yeah, so there hasn't been a deep space mission for as long as you've been alive. I was born in 79, so there definitely hasn't been one for as long as I'm alive. And they are now, or were, further from the Earth than any human in history, which is just amazing. And I think one of the reasons I want to talk about it is it's been quite a feel-good story. There's a lot of firsts for it. There's a lot of kind of midlife issues for us because all of the astronauts are in their 40s and 50s. So, they didn't pick 25-year-olds to go up there. They picked the good ones. And obviously one of them is a woman. There is a black astronaut there, Victor Glover. Christina Koch is the mission specialist, who's 47, same age as me. She was born in January 1979, so she's like a few months older than me. She'd have been older at school. Yeah, so I wanted to talk. Have you been following the story? Have you been watching? Because people have been literally glued to like the feeds, and I've seen so many of the beautiful pictures that are coming back and the quotes and stuff. Have you been following it?
No, sorry. I got more interested.
Yeah.
So we record this on a Wednesday. So Tuesday, when the photographs happened, or did we get them this morning? Anyway, when I saw the photographs, I was, obviously like, wow. But I didn't even know it was happening. So I am not one that is glued to television with any space exploration. However, when did I see it on the news? I don't know, 2 days ago. And I was like, oh, and then obviously the photos, but I'm not as excited as you, I have to admit, although I do get that it's absolutely amazing. Where is your love of, I was going to say, or space? Have you always been into space? Literally.
No, and I don't think it's space as such that's kind of grabbing me this time. I've always I've got a bit of a thing for the moon. I've got a little tattoo here of it, and I've got a little bit thing of it for its like, mostly for its like cyclical nature, and it's kind of, so I've got a bit of a mystical thing for the moon, probably, rather than a space thing for anything else. But I think one of the things that's grabbed me about this time is probably more that, that it's a positive story. When you see the astronauts that are up there talking, they are articulate, not like me, she says, not being able to find her words. They're articulate, they're intelligent, they're thoughtful, and I think that that's wonderful. Christina being Christina, we're on first name terms now. I'm just not sure if I'm pronouncing her surname right, so I thought I'd just stick with Christina. Being the same age as me has been kind of quite the thing as well. So she is the first woman to journey around the moon. She previously held the record for the longest space flight, which was 328 consecutive days in space by a woman, and did the first all-female spacewalk in October 2019. So she's kind of epic. I'm enjoying watching her be at literally the peak of her career as well, because there's so much like women are past it by the time they're in their 40s, and she's literally at the peak of her career. She's doing like the ultimate bit of her job right now, even if I'm sitting at home going, what have I done? Like, I'm going to take responsibility for all of her achievements too, because that's fine. But then that's quite an interesting point, because so she did an interview with Hello Magazine and saying that she still experiences imposter syndrome. And like, frankly, if you're like an astronaut flying around the moon and you still have imposter syndrome, then there's no hope for the rest of us, really. And she also talks about stereotype threat, which was quite interesting, which was feeling the weight of representing your whole group. So basically, she's feeling the weight of me taking responsibility for all of her achievements. So because she's the first woman to achieve all these things, she's essentially now become like representative of all women wanting to achieve things. And you can't kind of separate that out from what you do. So I thought that's quite an interesting take from a personal level for me, is that somebody who is doing so fantastically still has imposter syndrome about it. And that weight of representing your entire group, which is something that most men won't feel because they're just one of lots of men that have done these things. Do you suffer from imposter syndrome?
I sometimes wonder what imposter syndrome is. So I'm going to question that first. And I did listen to a podcast years ago, and this is going to be a useless comment because I can't remember what it was about, that questioned whether it exists. But I can't remember. So I said useless comment because I can't remember what they said. If I had have realised we were going to talk about imposter syndrome, I would have looked it up.
I'm sorry.
What is your definition? Like, what do you think? Because when I heard this podcast, it was kind of like, oh, we all have imposter syndrome because it's, I can't remember, like it's not real or something. I can't remember what it was. So you tell me what do you think she's feeling? What do you think?
So do you know what? I tend to think that it feels a bit like an imbalance between the way the rest of the world is potentially seeing you and the way you see yourself. Because if you're looking at someone else, much like what we see in social media, we just see these tiny little snapshots of their lives, right? So we see a successful person who's achieved things in their career. Whereas when you're looking at yourself, you see a whole big picture that other people don't see. So you are seeing all the failures that were there on your way to being a success. You're seeing the fact that you still go home and eat dinner. So even when you're comparing yourselves to other people in your field, you see bits about your life that other people don't see of you. So if you're looking at someone else in your field, you don't necessarily see them as a completely rounded human being because you don't get to see them in the bath. Well, maybe you do. I don't know. But do you see what I mean? So I think it's like that disconnect between being a whole rounded human being and being the stereotype example of this thing. So you go, well, I can't be in charge because I remember being 5.
Yeah. But then everybody remembers being 5.
Yes.
I think
So maybe we do all have imposter syndrome.
And therefore, to me, I think when someone says imposter syndrome, I presume they're meaning like when I walk in the room, I feel that I'm not worthy enough to be here. Let's just say.
Yeah.
But I suppose it's why do you feel that? And is that, as you said, because you just know all your warts, all your warts and all that nobody else sees? And if everybody's feeling so people say, I don't suffer with imposter syndrome, but maybe you do because you never feel. I don't know. It's not a topic I've really thought about, as you can tell.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, to be honest, I wasn't planning on discussing her imposter syndrome for ages. She said what works for her to help get over it is just assume that everyone's already noticed that you're good.
That's great advice, isn't it?
So assume that everybody knows you're good and therefore you don't have to prove how good you are. So
I like that. I think I'm more presume that I don't really care anymore. That sounds awful. If I walk into a room and you think I'm not worthy, I don't really care.
no.
I think that's where I'm at with my journey of that. It's almost like, there must be some times where I feel like, oh, but generally I'm just like, oh, whatever. And it's quite liberating because I can't think of the last time I walked somewhere and thought I shouldn't be here, because I'm not good enough. And that's not because I think I'm great. It's almost like I don't really care if you think I'm good enough or not.
Well, maybe imposter syndrome is more like when because I think we're all different in different circumstances, aren't we? So, you can walk into some rooms and you'll be like, oh, it's fine. I belong here. But then other places you might walk in and feel a bit out of your depth and a bit like you don't belong. So maybe imposter syndrome is when you're in a room where you should feel like you belong. So, for example, if you are an astronaut and you're with all the other astronauts, you should be feeling like, I'm just here with all my other little astronauts. We're all astronauts together.
Yeah, exactly.
But maybe you're feeling like, oh my God, I'm in a room with astronauts.
Yeah.
How have I ended up in here? This is ridiculous. So maybe that's the definition, but maybe that's what she's feeling. Maybe she's sat up there in space right now going, oh my God, I'm in space.
But that's just triggered a thought around this podcast that I can't remember. It was actually, is it a bad thing? Because if you walk into a room with astronauts and you're an astronaut and you're like, oh my God, it kind of humbles you as well. And it makes you thankful and appreciative and like, wow, I've done this. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe it's a kind of like,
maybe
because nobody likes somebody that's cocky.
Yeah, maybe not everybody has imposter syndrome, but the people who don't have imposter syndrome are idiots.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Almost like, I'm here because I should be here, which is nothing wrong with thinking that and being confident in that. But it's when it crosses over into just being like,
Trump. Don't think he has imposter syndrome.
No, I don't think he has imposter syndrome.
Anyway, there were some other lovely things that have come out. If you've not been watching the feed, these are things that maybe you could go find because there are some lovely things that have happened. There's been collective tears. So the commander's wife, Reed Wiseman, he's the mission commander, and his wife died of cancer in 2020. Aged 46, and during the flyby, they called down to Earth, and they wanted to name a crater after her. They spotted like a bright spot on the moon, and they wanted to call it Carroll after his wife. So there's now a Carroll Crater on the moon, and everybody cried in the spaceship. Everybody cried, and then they hugged each other, and then I'm pretty sure there was a lot crying on Earth too.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of posts as well around this is what masculinity is. It's like, this is a real good moment to show that, the the counterbalance, counter argument to toxic masculinity. Yeah. This is men crying, hugging each other, loving the moment, and actually that is amazing. So I have absolutely
space, and they're astronauts. Like, don't question their masculinity. So another thing that's beautiful about it is that it's kind of like that counterpoint to all the manosphere nonsense as well, isn't it? That they're all there in space doing their job as grown-ups. Like, we don't have to engage ourselves in all of these petty, stupid squabbles. And I think that's one of the things that people are maybe feeling from it with the world's quite heavy. And when you're literally seeing people looking back at Earth, and you are seeing Earth from outer space, from the moon, you just get this feeling of all of these stupid squabbles are unimportant.
Yes.
We are so lucky we're so lucky to be here. And I even saw one where someone was saying that she was asked what's her favourite planet. I can't remember who it was now. I should have written up my notes. This was just a thing that I literally read this morning. And what's her favourite planet? And she always said Saturn because of the rings. But then when she went into space and looked back and saw Earth, she realised Earth was her favourite planet because it's home. And that's kind of beautiful. Yeah, so that was beautiful. Carroll Crater. They have a mascot which floats around, their zero gravity indicator, which was designed by an 8-year-old, Lucas Ye, chosen from 2,600 entries across 50 countries. And it's the moon wearing the Earth as a baseball cap, which is super cute. So they've got that. They got beautiful photographs of the Earth where you can see the aurora borealis around the edges and stuff, which is absolutely beautiful. And the communications, a lot of those have been beautiful. So the International Space Station crew phoned Artemis for a chat as they went past the moon. And how cool is that? That these people are in space just ringing each other for a chat. And they were very interested in the differences between each other's spaceships. So, again, there's people being people in a nice way. And there was amazing clips of Christina calling down to, I didn't write that on my notes, but Christina calling down to mission control and speaking to a female mission controller down on Earth. And there are so many women in the control room as well. And historically, STEM has been an area that women haven't gone into. So the amount of women just involved in this, which is a historic mission, I think is also, basically, I'm quite excited. Can you tell?
You're quite excited. But what you haven't done is mention Nutella.
Oh, yes, they've got Nutella.
Because that one thing I noticed on the news was the Nutella jar floating around. And then I went online today, and obviously lots of people are talking about this, and this, what an advert for Nutella, and are Nutella going to grab hold of this and actually do anything with it? And I've seen Nutella commenting on people's posts about the Nutella floating around, but they don't have done anything yet. And it's like, you could not pay. I mean, how much would that cost from a marketing advertising budget perspective? One branded product I've seen floating around, in amongst everything is Nutella.
Because you've got to have the OG. You can't have unbranded chocolate hazelnut spread.
But also, I've seen nutritionists, not nutritionists, actually. The people that claim to be nutritionists that make videos in supermarkets saying you mustn't eat this thing because it's going to kill you, because it's got one thing in it, or, that you should, that's a preservative or whatever, which we did talk about on a podcast recently, didn't we? The kind of counter argument people online have been saying, just proving that, you can eat what you want to eat. You just have to, in moderation. And look, they're up there and they're eating Nutella. Like, it's fine. Yeah. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, the amount of different kinds of food they've got up there is amazing. I've seen that as well from nutritionists and dietitians saying that, there's variety of food up there, because food is not just fuel. It's also, you can eat things that taste nice, even if you're in space. It's important to have things even more important to have things that taste nice if you're in space.
Yes, it reminds you of home and makes you feel comfort. And
I know. Yeah. Can you imagine sitting in a spaceship watching? Did they see the solar eclipse? Didn't they? Watching the solar eclipse and eating Nutella on toast.
Yeah, I don't like Nutella, but yeah.
Well, that sponsorship opportunity gone, Kate.
I know. Well, I mean, I don't mind it in a croissant, making a pain au chocolat kind of thing. But I have done things like that before, but I wouldn't have been on toast. But the other thing I saw today was the daughter of one of the male astronauts. I can't remember his name. Was just like dancing around in a kind of "my dad's better than your dad" kind of thing. Again, my memory is absolutely shocking. I only saw it about 2 hours ago.
Oh,
But
yeah.
she is basically just like, my dad, my dad, my dad. Yeah, my dad's better than your dad. She doesn't actually say that, but that is kind of the, I'm so proud of him. And it was just everyone underneath was like, like how cool that your dad is up in space.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it is a truly historic moment, even if I do feel a little bit inadequate compared to the female astronaut who was also born in the year I was born. I'm like, what have I been doing with my life? Like, seriously. Jem, you've got a podcast. Like, it's hard.
Great opportunity for all the headlines for Dark Side of the Moon. And what is Pink Floyd doing again from a marketing perspective?
Get out.
I'm such a marketeer. I'm like, Nutella, why are you not doing something about this? Pink Floyd, like, come on, everybody.
So, I mean, of course, it's not been completely uncontroversial.
Trump called them.
Oh, yeah.
So
that was I was going to go with a more general controversy, but I enjoyed that. The one where they like literally sat there in silence after he'd finished speaking. And then everyone was like,
oh, well. Know if he'd gone.
And then they're like, you still there? Okay. Yeah, I'm still here. Okay. And everyone was like, oh, no, they weren't ignoring him. There was just a delay. And I'm like, I don't care. I still enjoyed it, even if that's what was happening. But I'm not convinced. It was a 9-second delay, not like a minute that they all sat there going, swizzling that microphone.
We have to remember it's a podcast. We've just done impressions of.
Oh, yeah. Impressions of twizzling a microphone. Insert your own there. That's fine. I was going to talk about the financial aspects of it. I was literally I had my eyelashes done this morning. Again, irrelevant to anybody who can't see the video here, but
they look nice.
Yeah, thanks. My lash lady, she was saying, oh yeah, because I keep seeing things about like petrol's so expensive, but they can afford to go to the moon. So the financial aspect.
This is my kind of slight ick around space exploration and all the things that happen. I have nothing against it, because it, from a science perspective and, all that kind of stuff. But I just think when I look at the poverty stats in America, for example, and worldwide, and I did write some down. She gets her book out at 35.9. So we'll round that up to 36 million people in America. I mean, I'm saying America. I don't even know who's funded this. Bear with.
It's NASA, isn't it? So presumably largely, because I mean, Trump was even talking about cutting their budget, wasn't he? So I imagine the astronauts are all like massive fans of his as well. So.
Yeah, that wouldn't be. But like 40 million people in America are in poverty. 14% of children are in poverty. A third of kids in the UK are in poverty. It's the money aspect. I think if we were in a time of boom, I think I would feel less icky about the cost. And I'm just like, wow, that's a lot of money. I mean, you probably know how much money. I don't know how much money, but millions. It just makes me feel uncomfortable when there's, that amount of kids, particularly in poverty. But I'm the same, I have to say, around like firework displays. We have one in the village, and I once found out it cost £10,000, and I was like, £10,000 and you've set fire to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like there's kids in our village that have no food at home and are, and come to school hungry. There's just that kind of ick about it. Now I know it's different. One's entertainment, one's science, and actually we should be able to enjoy ourselves and we should be doing scientific discoveries. But I just a little bit.
I concede that point. It's a similar. One of my the distribution of resources is obviously like an ongoing question when there are people in the world, I'm looking at you, Musk, who could literally solve all of those issues by giving away not even 10% of the money that they have. So I feel like that is there as an issue, but that doesn't mean we can't have nice things. I heard it. I even heard it locally here. We had a statue outside the art college here that was a Damien Hirst sculpture, and it went up for a while and people were complaining about it because there were potholes in the roads. And sometimes you just have to go, well, we can still have nice things. yes, they should be fixing the potholes, but that doesn't mean nobody gets art or entertainment until the potholes are fixed. Because there'll always be something else that, if they're fixing the potholes, then they'll go, oh, well, my hedge needs trimming, or, do you know what I mean? So that's like a small, tiny local thing, but I get that as an argument, and I get why it gives you the ick, but there is different ways of dealing with that other than not just not doing the one thing.
Yeah,
I think it's
I don't
because
think
one of the things I saw about
the
the economics argument, if it's again stuff like space exploration is long term, isn't it? So if we don't put that money into it now, in the future that might be like a thing that's regretted. So using one of the ideas of these kind of studies is that the launching rockets from the moon would be cheaper than launching them from Earth, because its gravity is like 1/6 of the Earth. So if we need an off-ramp that we're planning to explore any further out in the solar system, bearing in mind that we don't know what's out there, and there could be like, oh my God, well, this has fixed all of humanity's issues. Good luck. Then it's cheaper to do that long term from a base on the moon than it is from a base on Earth, just literally because of getting the rocket out of gravity.
I get that, but I think we need to fix our own planet first before we worry about what's happening on everybody else's on the other planets. I think that's where I'm at, and that's I think
we can do that with the moon,
but you need to deal with potholes. You need to do both.
We could do that with the moon too, though, because one of the things they're looking for is particularly water. So I'm going to read my notes because this is all science stuff that does not stay in my head for very long. There is the south pole of the moon has water trapped in permanently shadowed craters, and so that could be split into hydrogen, oxygen, and that could again be to do with having a base on the moon. You can make rocket fuel. You don't have to ship everything from Earth. There could be water there that then wouldn't have to be shipped from Earth if we were there. Then I've got, this isn't really relevant for this, but the moon could be a rehearsal space for Mars, because Mars is 3 days away. Rescue is possible on the moon, so you kind of get a practice first with life support habitats, before you get onto the Man on Mars, the film thing. But this was the one, is that the age of some of the rocks on there as well. So they've got rocks on the moon that are older than anything on the Earth. So what we could learn from the moon, from the water and from the rocks on the moon, could potentially give us answers about Earth that could help us fix Earth things. You can tell I'm a scientist, can't you?
Well, you're a scientist and I'm not. And I'm like, well,
I'm not a scientist.
Okay. But you're into it, and you sound into it. You sound incredibly passionate about it. Of course, you can do all those things, but we know loads of things we could be doing in the world right now, and we're not doing it. And it's just that side of it that I'm like, we're focusing very much on the future, like very and far out, in my opinion, when we need to just focus right now on the shit that's going on here. That's not taking away the feel-good factor and the positive news story and how interesting it is. I just, I feel like we've got so much more to fix. But this podcast would get.
Who would have thought that going to the moon would be a big topic?
Yeah, let's just deal with it. Well, we're going to move on to Kanye West in a minute, so that's another topic.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm kind of in a place right now where I get your point. I do. I acknowledge the point about, how shit Earth is, but also maybe I think that's why I'm finding this such a positive story at the moment. Maybe I'm just jealous that they're not here.
You just want to go to the moon and get off this planet.
Christina, why did nobody tell me? If I'd known earlier on that I could not be on the planet right now, maybe I'd have worked harder in science.
I failed science, because you could probably tell. Anyway, we need to wrap it up, because we've got to talk about Kanye.
Yeah. I don't have any insights to wrap this up with other than go Christina.
Go Christina. And the three
men. I was just particularly focusing on her because
my point was I don't really know.
The other guys are absolutely awesome too, and I think it's been really special. And getting those for over 50 years, our cameras are so much better now. The images that are coming back are so much more detailed, and it is beautiful. And I do really feel like if you look at those pictures, you can maybe get a little bit of a sense of perspective on the Earth.
Our second topic today is Kanye West, Wireless Festival, and I'm going to say freedom of speech, but yeah, we'll get on to that one. So a little bit of background. I think it was only about a week ago, because I had a conversation with my daughter. Wireless Festival has booked Kanye to headline 3 days of the Wireless Festival. I was like, oh, that's a bit of a controversial booking. And then it became more controversial because more people started talking about it, and there was a huge backlash in the media, and sponsors have been dropping out. So Pepsi's dropped out. And I'll give you a bit of background about this. So Kanye West, who describes himself as the greatest rock and roll star in the world, he said that on Glastonbury stage, over the last few years, done quite a few controversial, to say the least, things. He does have bipolar, which is a known thing, and has, over the last few years, had rants on Twitter, but as it was known then, that were anti-Semitic. They stopped working with him a couple of years ago because of the things he was saying. So this, he has had these manic episodes and gone online and said some dreadful things. But he's kind of taken it a few steps further in the last year. Last year, he created merchandise with swastikas on that were openly for sale. He also wrote a song called HH, which is Heil Hitler, last year, which did quite well and performed it at many a festival. And so Wireless have booked in, and people in this country have gone, whoa, I don't think Kanye should be headlining a 3-day festival each night. So 3 nights, considering the anti-Semitic rhetoric he has been spewing in the last few years. As I said, Pepsi pulled out, Diageo pulled out. The owner of Wireless did a statement a couple of days ago saying he sells loads of records and so people buy them. So, why can't he headline my festival? Which didn't go down very well. And then yesterday, so Tuesday, the government, Keir Starmer, said he was not welcome into the country. He would not be able to perform. Actually, it's worth saying Sadiq Khan last week as well said, whoa, we don't want him in London. He doesn't stand, his values and ethics do not stand for, how we feel in London. We don't want him. So subsequently, this festival has been cancelled. So everyone needs their refunds. So I want to talk about this, but I don't necessarily want to get too stuck on him. Although let's talk about him. I think there's a few things to really think about and chat about. One is the concept of freedom of speech. So there's a lot of people saying, well, so much for freedom of speech. But actually, we do have freedom of speech, but there is consequence for what we say.
Yeah.
So we could talk about freedom of speech.
Consequences are important.
Yeah. The concept of mental health, because there's a lot of people saying, well, really sorry, I can't remember his name, and we talked about it on the podcast, the man with Tourette's at the BAFTAs. Was forgiven, issued an apology and was kind of forgiven. Is that because he was white and Kanye is black? And are we not going to forgive Kanye? It's worth saying Kanye did issue an apology at the beginning of the year. But again, is bipolar, is it an excuse to behave like this? Is it allowed? It's all a bit of a tricky subject to talk about, and lots of people talking about that, and I'd love to talk about that too. But I'd also really like to talk about the thing that my children keep saying. First of all, my daughter says it's such a shame about Kanye because he's got some real banging tunes, quote unquote, because, historically, he has had some banging tunes. But my son and a lot of people, like his friends, a lot of people are saying, can you separate the art from the artist? Are you allowed to still listen to his music, even though he said problematic things? So I'd love to talk about that. And the other things, I've got a list here. So I'm seeing a lot of stuff about, don't worry, Kanye will be fine. Kanye is laughing all the way to the bank. About how male celebrities go through all this kind of cancellation because of their really bad behavior, and they're absolutely fine. Chris Brown still sells out stadiums, even though he beat Rihanna, and was charged for that. Whereas somebody like Chapel Roan sets a few boundaries and everybody's really on her and is still talking about that, something we talked about last week in the podcast. So it's kind of like, cancel culture and how it doesn't always affect the men. So lots to talk about.
Where are we starting?
So what I'd really like to probably start with is the freedom of speech bit, because then we can move off. We'll talk about freedom of speech and the bipolar, mental health, all that kind of stuff. And then we can kind of move on from him and talk about other people. So freedom of speech, actually, I said it does have consequence, and you nodded straight away.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing people always forget about freedom of speech is, yes, you can say exactly what you like, but it doesn't mean that there aren't consequences to it. So in this case, the consequence is for him that he's not welcome in the UK. I feel like we also don't technically have freedom of speech in the UK, do we? It's not like built into our constitution the way it is in the US, because we have a kind of slightly different thing. And I think people just quite often forget that, the consequences of your speech are still always going to be there. If you upset people are still going to be upset. And if you upset the wrong people, then you might not get to do what you want to do. It's freedom of speech, not freedom to do whatever you please. So I do think that is quite important. But I also think it's interesting with how that relates to his bipolar disorder. So it's John Davidson, who was the guy with Tourette's at the BAFTA. But Tourette's and bipolar are different conditions, obviously.
Yeah.
I am not I did used to work in a psychiatric hospital, but I am not an expert. Feel free to tell me I'm wrong in the comments about all this. But my understanding is essentially, with something like Tourette's, you will deliberately say things that are upsetting, offensive, that kind of thing. Your brain kind of goes straight to an area. It doesn't necessarily have any reflection on your beliefs, just that it's a word or an action that you know that you mustn't do. Okay? So that's there, and therefore it becomes like the elephant in the room, and you physically can't stop. It's like a neurological blip. Bipolar is complicated but different, and it essentially removes filters. I've worked with lots of people with bipolar, and you think they're the nicest people in the world when they're on their medication, and in their notes there's just some terrible things that they've done, and that's the reason they were in a hospital rather than a prison for a lot of them. So again, it's not freedom from consequences, but it's an understanding that a disease can be what made you act on an impulse, not that gave you the impulse. So bipolar tends to more remove filters. So when we're talking about Kanye, bipolar didn't make him become anti-Semitic. Those beliefs will predate his manic episodes, but during manic episodes, the filters that means that you hold them in are removed. So
the issue I have is, I know there are people close to me that have bipolar, so I don't understand it, but I know what happens, if you know what I mean. I don't understand what's happening in their brain, but I know what the output is. I can absolutely understand that in a manic episode, he could take to Twitter and say things, but to come up with the idea of merch, design it, have it produced, have it made, have it shipped, have it uploaded to your website, that's like next level. That's not like one little episode. That's a whole chain of events. There's a supply chain, in fact, going on, and there will be other people
involved in this.
Exactly, other people involved who had the option to say, whoa, I don't think this is a really great idea, mate. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Same with the song. It had to be recorded. It had to be produced. It had to be put on Spotify. And it also continued to be played at festivals. So it's kind of like, I can absolutely understand manic episodes can lead to things happening, but that's a whole chain of events, isn't it? That's just like...
Then on the kind of defense of the behavior side, look at me being all balanced. The other thing that something like bipolar can do is like the removal of those kind of those filters and that kind of control also makes someone very vulnerable to suggestion and to other people's ideas. So
exactly.
And that is something that then can persist beyond a manic episode, I guess. So
Well,
that
who are
is a
these
concern as
people?
well. And it's always very easy to say, people got all the money in the world, what have they got to worry about? But I genuinely think, and this is something we've seen with Britney as well, is that sometimes all that money, fame and power can actually make you more vulnerable in a way, because it takes down some of those safeguards that you have if you're a regular person that hasn't got millions of dollars. There are other people whose livelihoods depend on you, who are perfectly willing to let you go down a terrible route, and they've got no interest in your well-being or safety, just in the fact that you've got lots of money. So when we then start talking about supply chains and producing things, there are a lot of people in there who are essentially
making money,
and they are taking advantage of a vulnerable person, but we don't think that that's a vulnerable person because they're rich and they're making loads of money out of it. But we have to remember all the other people at places in that chain who are also making money out of it without, calling their GP or community mental health team, the kind of things that would catch a regular person, all those kind of safeguards, just poof.
There's been a lot of talk as well around the swiftness of the government banning him, but are happy to accept other people. So again, it's like, so he's not accepted, he's not coming, but Trump is, for example. There's lots of people saying that. Or other people on the Epstein list, just et cetera, et cetera. He's just like, where does it stop? Why is he the worst? Is that, so there's a lot. Nigel Farage, for example, has been quite vocal about how he should be accepted into the country. Interestingly, he did this whole interview around how people that want to come to the UK should be allowed to come to the UK, which obviously did have quite a lot of a backlash around the irony.
Sure, I've heard
of
that from you before.
But again, Kanye is quite vocal in his support of Trump. So, there's all that going on. What I think the one thing for me that I'd love to really talk about is the separating the art from the artist, because I do struggle with this myself. There are, so for example, Queens of Stone Age are one of my favorite bands live. Josh Homme, the lead singer, his wife had a restraining order against him because of his violence, for example, as did his daughter at one point. I don't know if she still does, but I still have seen them live after. So does that make me a right royal hypocrite? Do you separate the art? It's just, how does this work? Because nobody is perfect. Now, I'm not saying, obviously, there's one thing being anti-Semitic and writing the HH song. Let's just park that for a moment. People do questionable things, but they're creating art. There's probably artists that, in the historical who have done dreadful things, but we still admire their art. Are we allowed to? Should we not?
I find this is very interesting, and I can't, part of me says that, yes, we can have that separation, but that's between art and artist and not what the result is of your consumption of the art. And I don't know if that was very clear, or if I should definitely clarify. So I'm going to use J.K. Rowling as an example here, because she's a recent example that's meant something particularly to me. So for J.K. Rowling has bizarrely suddenly decided that her sole thing in life is to bring down trans women for no reason whatsoever that I can work out. And I believe that she is wrong. But I have been a Harry Potter fan for years. I read the books when they first came out. When the last book came out, I got it like on the day and read it all in one day. I was a big, big Harry Potter fan. And for years, I was a bit like, when she was like chuntering along in the background, I was a bit like, why is she being a bit weird, and carried on doing my thing. And then I was a bit like, okay, well, no, you really are being weird now. And I started trying to consume it in a way that meant she didn't make any money out of it. Like, I'm happy to buy knockoff bits off AliExpress, and I'm happy to buy, and I was reading the books that I already owned. And I have the audiobooks, which are narrated by Stephen Fry. I quite often listen to those while I was going to sleep. So I was trying to do it in a way that she wouldn't make any money out of it, because I could see that she was using her money to do things that I did not agree with. Recently, I put the audiobook on to go to sleep, and to be honest, the whole thing then just gave me a bit of ick, because it was like she'd gone so far, she'd finally got to the point where I could not separate the art from the artist, and therefore that art was ruined for me, because all I could think of while I was consuming the art, whether she was making any money out of it or not, was her. So I feel like there's like levels of it. Is one of the things is, if by consuming some of this art, are you funding things that you don't believe in? Are you providing financial aid to something that you don't believe in? Like, she's using her money to actively fight against trans rights. And then there's that separation in your brain. Are you at the point where you are making that separation? Because another example is Buffy, where Joss Whedon turned out to be an actual idiot. And I know that you weren't a Buffy person. Like, I am still a massive Buffy fan. So maybe Joss Whedon, maybe he just faded away into the background and I can still consume that. But there are a lot of people involved in Buffy. It's not just him. So there's also the kind of, is it an ensemble piece or is it a one-off thing? Do I have a point? Who knows?
Yeah, it's just really hard, isn't it? And some people definitely don't come back. So, and it's totally unacceptable to like them. Obviously, I'm to talk more in the music sphere. So, Marilyn Manson, that's like a no-no. And I think everybody kind of agrees with that. But then Kanye, by what I'm reading, there's millions of people that don't care about that, or maybe agree. I don't know. Obviously, some people might just agree with what he said. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's a hard one. And sometimes back to this, well, actually another point was around how men can come back from it. So I've seen quite a few posts in the last 2 days about Kanye, obviously, but then saying about Chris Brown, for example, and then saying about who else was there? There were other people on the list who just have bounced back. Russell Brand was another one. Yes, he might not be accepted in the commercial, what we see on television, but he's still making a huge amount of money and still hugely respected within
whatever weird sphere he's in
his sphere, and he's still making a fortune, even though he's also going into court on rape charges. So he's not been cancelled totally, but the posts I'm seeing are like, but then there's Chapel Roan and people are still going on about how she's mean. And it's like, because she sets some boundaries. And it's just, yeah. Does it even matter anyway to Kanye? Like, he's lost a bit of money, but not really. He'll make even more money. He'll go and do a different festival and he'll make an absolute shed loads of money. So it's kind of like, is there a point to this? Like, what's the...
I see, again, one of those things might be perspective, I think, because Chapel Roan hasn't been cancelled. Like, not only did she not do anything even that terrible, but there's people like us who are still like, we're on your side, Chapel. So maybe it's just that polarization again, one person who is cancelled to us, because people asked again, oh, Chris Brown's still making money, and he is, but people who may have consumed his music before are now not because of that thing. So there is that polarization. There are some people who will either say that they can separate art from artist or agree, and then they're the people who can't separate it. So I think maybe it's just a decision that we ultimately have to make individually about the particular work of art, what it means to us, what the issue is. And I think sometimes, again, that's that nuance that we kind of forget, that like, it doesn't have to be one thing or the other. And that, I can still have a soft spot for Harry Potter because it was, with me through some like great moments in my life without loving J.K. Rowling. But if I make that decision right now to give her money when she has literally come out and said, this is what I'm going to spend it on, that's something that morally you then have to deal with yourself and decide where your boundaries lie. But I do think everybody has the right to set their own boundaries.
They do, but I think personally, that's the bit I'm struggling with, because it's like, on the one hand, if somebody is charged with some kind of abuse, I shouldn't listen to their music anymore, because I feel like that's the right thing to do. If the man next door was charged with abuse, I wouldn't talk to him. Like, I wouldn't have anything to do with him. But then the pull of the art becomes quite great. So I suppose for me, it's that kind of moral dilemma. When I think of myself as a feminist, as somebody that's, is left wing, doesn't want people to be hurt, doesn't, wants to do the right thing. But then the pull of the music or the film or the art or is so strong that it's like, then I think, oh my God, I'm just a hypocrite. Am I allowed to be a hypocrite?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like I'm being pulled.
I do see what you mean, but again, it's
nuance though.
It's the layers, isn't it? When you say the pull of the art is so strong, does that mean buying new work that they've released? Does it mean going, do you know what? I love that particular song from the past that was a real key moment in my life, so I'm going to play it now at home? Or is it, if you have a public platform, playing that song on a public platform and therefore like promoting it to new people who may hear it and then do you see what I mean? There's so many layers to how we consume art as well. It's are we publicly consuming it? Are we privately consuming it? Are we consuming historical art? Are we supporting economically the production of new and controversial art? Like, so where we set our limits on that spectrum might relate to, something that we essentially have to set ourselves on a case-by-case basis, because there will be so many things feeding into it, like how much that meant to us, what that person did, all of that will all feed into it, and then we have to find that level within ourselves.
Yeah, and I think it's sometimes linked to the ongoing, I was going to say crime. I'm just going to call it crime, not necessarily, they need to be arrested crime, but that they're doing. Because if somebody did something once, I might go, okay, I don't agree with that. It's really bad. Obviously, it depends what the one thing is, obviously. But then say with J.K. Rowling, it's continual. And it's not going anywhere. It's not changing. Kanye, the jury is still out, because he took out a one page in the New York Times, I think it was, something like that, apologizing. But will it happen again? I don't know. It's still, to me, it still feels quite raw and ongoing. And then somebody that did something 10 years ago and has not done it again, and that's where the nuance comes in as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think back to Kanye particularly, like, because I'm starting to get a headache now. This is all very deep for lunchtime. Yeah, like back to Kanye, I think booking him to headline 3 days of a festival feels like not the best idea at the moment. He is saying that he's now in treatment and stuff, but it's not something that I would have chosen myself. I mean, not that anyone's ever going to ask me who they want to headline Wireless, but I feel like it was a poor choice. But then when it comes to saying he's banned from the UK, again, maybe that feels very extreme to me when other people aren't, and it feels quite knee-jerk reaction, which I am never a fan of. And also then because it's anti-Semitism as well, and all starts tying into an awful lot of other shit going on in the world at the moment as well. And so that feels like an extreme reaction to me. But also booking him to headline Wireless feels foolish.
Yeah, but then, he's the greatest man in the rock. I don't remember what he said on Glastonbury. He headlined Glastonbury and he stood there and said, I'm the greatest rock and roll star that's ever lived.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a thing, the kind of thing that bipolar can make you say.
Excuse me, I don't think that's factually correct. But then, as my son pointed out, last year Wireless booked Drake for three days, and there's been lots and lots of stuff about him and his texting 13-year-old girls. So again, like Wireless probably, is used to a little bit of controversy.
Yeah.
I think the fact that they've gone from a music perspective, Wireless used to have a different headline act across every day, and then last year they did one act for 3 nights, and they've repeated it. And obviously if you cancel one of those people, the whole festival's gone. So hopefully they will not do that again, because that's
maybe
the risk.
Economically there's a decision to work on there as well.
Did the government need to ban him from the country? As Wireless lost all their sponsors, could it have happened anyway? You know what I mean? If you lose all your sponsors, it does seem a bit knee-jerk, and as you said, and it's also given a rise to a lot of people saying, as I said earlier, well, you've banned him, but you haven't banned him. Or, what happened to freedom of speech? It's all just now, and even more conversations rather, and lost the point of, should he have headlined in the first place?
Well, that does mean Finsbury Park is free 10th to 12th of July. Do you think we should book it for a live podcast recording?
I worked at Wireless 2 years ago. And yeah, it was quite good. But yeah, I don't know what they're going to do now. That's a lot of money lost and refunds given. So yeah, I'm going to go and carry on thinking then about separating the art from the artist. I do think it's a tricky one. You know, it's
It
like,
is.
didn't you wear Hugo Boss, but Hugo Boss, didn't he create uniforms for the Nazi party or something? I think
Yeah.
it was Hugo Boss. I think it was, you know,
It's
it put people
Chanel's another one. Chanel's another
now,
one.
you know, and it's so it's, and I know that's obviously really historical and not happening as we speak. But yeah, I don't know.
It is, yeah. I believe that it has and will continue to be an ongoing debate. So sorry we couldn't solve it in the last 10 minutes.
And thank you for joining us for another roundup of midlife chat, hot takes, and occasional moaning. Well, quite a bit of moaning.
Make sure you hit subscribe so your podcast app gently nudges you every Friday, because honestly, who remembers anything without a reminder this day? And also, we like people liking us because we're very needy.
And if you fancy being extra lovely, leave us a rating or a review. It helps more brilliant women like you find us. Have a great weekend, everyone, and make sure you find time for yourself. You deserve it.